Hello, class, and welcome to Lesson 10, where we'll be talking about Solomon's kingdom. So if you remember in our last lesson, we left off where David was giving some words of advice to Solomon before he passed away. And part of that was he told him about a few people who Solomon would have to deal with. Well, that's exactly where we pick up here, and we'll see how Solomon does deal with these people. So start out, we see that Adonijah, he's going to go to Bathsheba to have a talk. And now the purpose of this is that he wants Bathsheba to go to Solomon and ask a request. And the reason why he's doing it this way is, remember, Adonijah and Solomon would not be on the best of terms. They were both trying to be king, and of course we saw that Solomon became king. So Adonijah knows that if he tries to go to Solomon and ask him something, that Solomon's probably going to say no. But if Solomon hears that request coming from his own mother, then maybe he'll say yes. So that's why he's doing that. So what he wants Bathsheba to ask Solomon is if Solomon would give Adonijah a woman by the name of Abishag as his wife. Now, we didn't talk too much about this in the last lesson, but this woman did come up, Abishag. If you remember, David was very old, and we saw that he was having trouble keeping warm. And the solution that his servants came up with is that they would find someone to sleep next to David, and he would stay warm that way. Well, they did find a person, and that person was this woman named Abishag. So Bathsheba agrees. She says, okay, I'll go to Solomon and ask this. So she goes to Solomon and asks that. And when Solomon hears it, he is upset. He's very angry. In fact, what he says, not in these exact words, but basically, why are you asking this of me? You might as well ask me to hand over the kingdom to Adonijah, Abiathar, and Joab. And so he's so upset that Adonijah asked this that he sends Benaiah, whomever one of his followers, to execute Adonijah. And so Adonijah is now executed. So let me back up here and explain what's going on, because you might be wondering, well, that's a very harsh reaction. What was so wrong about that request? In those days, if a king, I guess you could say former king, were to, or let me say, if someone were to marry a former king's concubine, that would be a sign that that person would be like the legitimate next king, something like that. So even though Abishag wasn't technically a concubine, she still had a very close relationship to David. So by Adonijah marrying her, it could be seen as an attempt to try to claim ownership of the kingdom. And so Solomon saw this, and that's why he was so upset about this. Okay, so next, Solomon is going to focus on Abiathar, the priest. So you remember, that's the priest who sided with Adonijah whenever Adonijah said he would be king. So Solomon thinks that Abiathar deserves death, but he's going to show him mercy because during David's rule, Abiathar was very loyal to David, and he was actually one of the priests who carried the ark of the Lord for David. So because of this, he shows mercy to Abiathar. He doesn't kill them, but he does tell him to go back to his own home and that he would no longer be priest. So Abiathar is no longer going to be the priest. Now Joab hears, remember he was the commander of David's army. Joab hears about what's going on, about how Solomon's dealt with Adonijah, how he dealt with Abiathar. So now he becomes fearful for his life because he knows he also sided against Solomon. So in his fear, what he does is he goes and flees to the tabernacle and takes hold of the horns of the altar. So where else have we heard about this? Well, if you were with us in the last lesson, that's exactly what we read about that Adonijah did. So here we have Joab doing the same thing. And again, the reason for this is if you were to go to the altar and take hold of the horns, that would be considered like a holy place. So, maybe no one would dare strike you down there because it's a holy place. Solomon hears what Joab has done, and he sends Benaiah to strike him down. So when Benaiah shows up, he sees that Joab's there, holding onto the horns, and he tells Joab to come out, but Joab refuses and said he was going to die there. So Benaiah is not sure what to do. He goes back to Solomon and says, hey, I found him, but he was holding on to these horns and he wouldn't leave and said that he would die there. What should I do? And Solomon says, well, let him have his request. And so he sends Benaiah back, and Benaiah strikes Joab down there, and Joab dies right there. So now you have these two empty spots in Solomon's administration. The priest has been, there's no priest, and now there's no commander of the armies. So Solomon decides that Benaiah is going to be the new commander of the armies, and that Zadok is going to be the new priest. Remember, Zadok was the priest who did side with Solomon in the last lesson. Now, finally, we're going to see how Solomon deals with Shimei, who you remember was one of the guys that was hurling insults and curses at David when he was fleeing from Absalom. Solomon does show mercy because he could have just executed him there, but instead he gives Shimei an alternative and says, come to Jerusalem, build a house here, dwell here, but never leave. If you leave Jerusalem, then it'll be your own fault that you're dead. You will be executed. So Shimei agrees to this and follows it for a couple of years, but we read that a couple of years later, he has to break the agreement because he has two slaves that run away, and he's trying to find them. And during that process, he leaves Jerusalem, and Solomon finds out that he broke the promise, and so now Shimei gets executed. So there's now no longer anyone who stands in the way of Solomon's kingdom. In the next section, we'll read about how Solomon asked for wisdom. So one of the things you think of whenever King Solomon is brought up is people often know that, oh, that's the wisest king of Israel. Well, here we're going to read how Solomon did get that wisdom. So Solomon goes to Gibeon, and he offers 1,000 burnt offerings to the Lord. Now, one night while he's there, the Lord appears to him in a dream and says, ask, what shall I give you? So Solomon can ask anything of the Lord, and the Lord's going to give it to him. So take a moment and think about what you would say. Would you be as wise as Solomon? Hopefully. But it's an opportunity that, no one else has had, that we definitely have not had. Solomon says he would like wisdom. And so the Lord is very pleased with this answer. And he agrees he's going to give Solomon that wisdom as long as he follows his commandments. And in addition, he's going to go ahead and give Solomon wealth and riches and honor, even though he didn't ask for that. So that is how Solomon gets his wisdom. And we see an example of him executing this wisdom in this very next section, which you've probably heard a story about. It's where Solomon has to decide the case about the women who both claim that a child is theirs. So what happens here, there's two women, they live in the same house, they both have a child around the same time, and one night, one of the women's child dies, and so she takes the dead child and switches it out with the living child of the other mother. And so when the other mother wakes up, she finds this dead child, but she realizes, hey, this is not my child. But the other mother is saying, yes, it is. And so there's an argument there. So that's what Solomon hears. And the way he decides the case is he asks for someone to bring him a sword, and that he's going to cut the child in two. Now, it sounds kind of odd, and, it's like, why would he ask that? But it's very, very wise thing to say, because by doing this, he's able to find out who the real mother is, because the real mother is horrified about this. And she says she just wants the child to live so the other woman can have it. And of course, the woman who it's not her child, she says basically, if you don't get a child and I don't get a child, go ahead and do that. So very easily, Solomon's able to tell who the real mother is. On the final sections, we read about Solomon's administration. We see him using some more of that wisdom here because he's ruling such a large area. He knows he needs help, so he appoints 12 governors to help him rule over Israel. And we read about how Solomon's kingdom is extremely prosperous. His land stretched a very large area. His armies are large. They're well kept. And Solomon's wisdom, his wealth, and his reputation are known throughout the land. So that's where we end lesson 10. So keep up with your reading, answer the questions, and we will see you with lesson 11 video. So thanks for watching. All right, bye.